And we are live. Welcome everyone to another event of the Old Schoolhouse lecture series. I'm really excited to be here tonight with Tom and this visual tour of the Keys Desert Queen Ranch. Welcome everyone. Thank you again so much for being here. I'm Gabacia Moreno, and I'll be your host tonight on behalf of the Desert Institute. For those of you who are new, the Old Schoolhouse Lecture Series is a partnership between the 29 Palms Historical Society and the Desert Institute, and it began about 17 years ago. So tonight's program is one of a monthly lectures and discussion series that we hold on the second Friday of each month. Before we officially begin, I want to take a moment in the name of everyone here present to respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land we are on for time immemorial. So for Joshua Tree National Park, where the Desert Institute is housed, I want to acknowledge the Mojave, Cahuilla, Serrano, and Chemehuevi. For Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I am tuning in from tonight, I want to acknowledge the Jicarilla Apache and the Pueblo people. Now, off to some housekeeping rules as we go through tonight's presentation. Number one, we love to hear from everyone on the chat. We just ask that you are nice to each other. And questions will be answered at the end of the presentation to avoid any confusion with streaming delays and things like that. There's an ask a question button on the screen, which you can click on and submit questions throughout the presentation. In case we get disconnected, please bear with us. It happens once in a while, probably more often than we would like it, but just be patient, take a moment. I recommend everybody to refresh their browser, and then we'll be doing all the troubleshooting that we can on our end. The good thing is that in this platform, we've noticed that even if we go offline in the stream, we can still use the chat and communicate with you, so you'll be hearing from us on the chat. And then last but not least, we appreciate your donations. We appreciate you being here tonight, sharing our posts, donating, and supporting in all the ways that you always have. So without much further ado, I want to hand it over to Thomas so that he can introduce himself and tell us about tonight's presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Tom Crochetiere, and I want to start off by letting you know I have a tendency to talk a little fast, so I will try to remind myself to slow down and do the best job I can. I work with the National Park Service at Joshua Tree National Park as an interpretation visitor service representative. I have been working there for nearly 8 years. I also volunteer at the California Welcome Center in Yucca Valley, and I currently serve on the board of directors for the Morongo Basin Historical Society. Tonight, I will take you on a visual and historical tour of the Desert Queen Ranch, home to Bill and Frances Keys. The guided tour of the ranch will include the colorful story of the Keys family. The ranch house, storehouse, schoolhouses, machine shop, outbuildings, corral, windmills and wells, stamp mill, and arrastra can all be seen there today. The orchard and irrigation system are still visible, and the grounds are full of cars, trucks, mining equipment, farm equipment, and spare parts that are all part of the Desert Queen story. The National Park Service began giving guided tours of Desert Queen Ranch in 1976 to commemorate the nation's bicentennial. The ranch is more commonly known today as Keys Ranch. Tours are seasonal and are typically held between October and May, and they are generally not available during the hot summer months. To preserve its historic character, admission to the ranch is restricted to guided walking tours only. Sadly, theft and vandalism have occurred at the ranch in the past, as well as other locations of the park, so seasonal caretakers, park volunteers, live at the ranch to help keep an eye on it. They provide their own RV to live in, while at the park provides them with potable water and sewage disposal. There is no electricity throughout most of the park, including the ranch. Caretakers have their own solar battery system and a generator to provide their electricity that they might need. Please note, no one is allowed on ranch property without being escorted by a park ranger or authorized staff. Keys Desert Queen Ranch is located in a remote, rocky canyon of Joshua Tree National Park. The area was first occupied by seasonal American Indians. Later, cattlemen arrived to graze and water their cattle there, and they established a camp. When gold was discovered, the area was transformed into a mill site. William Bill Keys arrived in the area around 1910 at the age of 30. At first, he worked as a cowboy and lived in the Surprise Spring area north of Joshua Tree. Bill Keys then began to work as a mule skinner for the Desert Queen Mine in present-day Joshua Tree National Park and started living at the camp and mill site. In 1913, Bill Keys started to build a permanent cabin where he lived at the campsite, calling it the Desert Queen Ranch. Bill Keys was born on September 27, 1879 in Nebraska. His name at birth was George Barth. He had 10 brothers and sisters, and after a dispute with his father, he left home at the age of 15 in 1894. In 1898, for unknown reasons, he changed his name to William Franklin Key. In about 1917, Bill Keys added S to his last name due to a male confusion with Johnny Key, who lived nearby in present-day area of Pioneer Town. Although spelled differently, both names are pronounced the same. Frances May Lawton was born September 24, 1887 in Ohio. She had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. Frances worked in Los Angeles for several years as a stenographer and also for the Western Union as a telegrapher, and this is where she is believed to have met Bill Keys. At the age of 39, Bill Keys married Frances Lawton of Pasadena on October 8, 1918, and brought her to the Desert Queen Ranch. She was 31. Bill soon began to enlarge the cabin while they started a family. Bill and Frances had 7 children together. 2 died just days after birth, William Jr. and David. 1 died at age 11 from an injury. His name was Ellsworth. And the other 4 children, Willis, Virginia, Patricia, and Phyllis, all grew up and attended school at the ranch. Bill and Frances spent over 44 years working together to make a life and raise a family in this secluded location. Life in the desert presented many challenges. Summers were extreme, and there would be several years with little or no rainfall. Crops would fail, and water wells ran dry. The work was hard, and neighbors far away. Few homesteaders met the challenge. Many farms and small homesteads were abandoned, leaving behind the tiny cabins which still litter the desert in places today. Food and supplies were difficult to come by. The closest town of Banning was nearly 60 miles away. They had to travel a rough, deeply rutted dirt road to get there. Through their hard work, they built one of the largest, most self-sustaining ranches of its kind in the area. Over the years, Bill obtained a vast amount of knowledge of just about everything he would need to survive, to raise a family, and to prosper. Through Bill's many experiences, he learned everything from nature to the stars and universe, to animals, farming, and to mineralogy. Bill spent long hours tending to livestock, such as mules, burros, horses, cattle, goats, chickens, milk cows, and whatever they would need to survive. He even had an amazing orchard and garden, as well as crop fields. Bill had up to 30 mines at one time and worked each of them until they had nothing more to give. Bill ran 1 or more mills, mostly processing ore from other mines, charging them by the ton. After her marriage to Bill Keys, Frances worked very hard and tried to keep everything clean. She did all the housework, washed clothes by hand, and did the canning during canning season. Frances was an excellent cook, cooking from memory, and she did not rely on recipes. If beef was not available, she would use chicken, domestic rabbit, cottontail, or jackrabbits. She always made sure there was plenty to eat for breakfast and dinner. Frances was very creative and knew how to make things last. She knew how to sew and taught her kids the same. Frances tended to the garden and ran the chicken and rabbit pens. She even assisted with the mining. Although not having any formal training, she was also an informative teacher. The walking tour will take you along the road to the ranch by a wash crossing where you will find a site once used by American Indians long ago. There was once a spring nearby, but it, as most of the springs within the Joshua Tree National Park, have long since dried up. During and after heavy rains and snow melting, the water can flow very fast along this wash, leaving pools of water. Near here is also a small cave where one could get shelter from the heat or of the sun or from the rain from a storm. There's also an old bowl-like mortar created by American Indians that was hollowed out into the rock to use to grind seeds, nuts, and other bits of food into meal for hundreds of years. Pinyon pine that produces pine nuts and scrub oak that produces acorns for use for the food source are found nearby. The Serrano and Coya Indians are believed to have inhabited this area as early as the 1500s and remained to the 1800s. This is the only remaining visible evidence of the first inhabitants at the ranch site today. There were not many good wood sources in the desert, and people had to find ingenious ways to make do with what they had. A Joshua tree log fence was constructed at the beginning of the ranch, as well as one in front of the ranch house. Prior to Bill Key's arrival to the camp and the mill site, 2 adobe cabins and 1 adobe barn had been constructed there in the 1880s. In 1914, Bill removed the 2 cabins to make room to plant an orchard and garden, but the barn remained there for several years. The original barn had 2 wings used for animals. The main barn was for hay and feed and grain, as well as chickens. The adobe barn started to fall apart around the 1930s. Bill later removed it in the 1950s. Not much, if anything, of the old barn is visible today. There are a number of old adobe brick and adobe brick molds scattered about. Bricks were made from adobe that are usually made by processing the earth, clay, and organic material mixture into an open wood frame and left to dry and harden in the sun. This portable mixer that is found here was used to mix the adobe material needed to create the adobe brick used for building construction. This particular mixer was manufactured by the J.H. Day Company of Cincinnati, Ohio, who began operations in the 1880s. Wood forms were used to pour the adobe mixture into, and they were allowed to set before removing them for use. At this location, the machine shop was built by Bill Keys in the 1930s. It stands where the 2 adobe barns once stood. 2 adobe cabins once stood. It is located before the main ranch house. The shop was made of recycled material that Bill would gather from abandoned claims as well as mining sites. He would gather old metal water tanks, flatten them out to use them for doors, for walls, or for the roof. He would also scavenge lumber for the construction. Inside the shop are many tools, supplies, used parts, bits and pieces of just about everything. In front of the old machine shop is a old military surplus armor truck that had been purchased by a man in Joshua Tree. He converted it to haul heavy drilling equipment. With the help of his dad, Willis Keys purchased this truck in 1953 and took it to the ranch. He took off the rear box and adapted the truck for use for around the ranch. The truck would go anywhere they would ever want to go to haul heavy items. Next to the machine shop, you'll see a large open-top adobe hopper, which was erected by Bill Keys in the 1950s. Bill would mix adobe in large batches and then pour it into the wood molds. Next to the large hopper is what appears to be a well. However, it is a pit about 15 to 20 feet deep where Bill Keys dug clay to put into the hopper to make adobe bricks. The elevated water tank located next to the clay pit and the adobe hopper was also erected in the 1950s. It received its water supply from a well and windmill nearby. This water tower became the primary source for watering the orchard and garden and supplying water to the ranch house. In the 1880s, a well was dug to supply water to the adobe cabins. A windlass was used at first to bring the water up. A windlass is a type of winch used to lower buckets into the well and hoist them up with water. Sometime in the 1910s, Bill cleaned out the well and dug it deeper. Over the years, they'd have to continue to dig it out, sometimes digging around rocks to get to the water source. In 1936, Bill and Francis's 10-year-old son, Ellsworth, was cranking up the windlass to pull a water bucket of water. The metal either slipped out of his hands or the brake disengaged when he thought it was latched and the metal handle struck him in the head. There were no doctors or hospitals nearby, so Bill and Francis did whatever they could for Ellsworth. He never fully recovered from the injury and died the next year at age 11. Bill Keys installed a hand pump shortly thereafter to make the job easier. The current windmill was later installed to do the work of the hand pump. A gasoline engine was also later installed to pump the water. Sometime in the late 1890s, a well was dug in the area where the current orchard is now today. Bill first planted fruit trees there when he built his cabin. Then he and Francis later planted several more. Bill used an auger to drill holes in the ground and put 3 or 4 stickets of dynamite in these holes to blow it large enough to plant the trees. This would loosen the ground enough so the trees could take root and grow. Later, Bill and Francis expanded the gardens, planting fruits and vegetables, and they would can these in the amounts provided for the whole family, so for food to last the entire winter. Bill would fertilize the orchard and garden with manure he collected from horses, cattle, and mules. The original water well in the center of the orchard eventually ran dry, but Bill did not immediately cover it up. One day, while plowing the field with a team of mules, one of them fell into the well. Luckily, Bill was able to get the mule out, and he then covered the well. Bill ran water pipes through the orchard and the garden, placing water faucets with water supplied from the dam and the nearby water tower he erected in the 1950s. During the summer months, it could rain hard for an hour or more, causing the lake to fill up and the water to come over the dam. There were times the overflow was several feet high. It endangered the orchard and the house. Around 1940, Bill began to build a retaining wall along the wash to protect the orchard and the house. He then began to build the wall by the house. Bill made his own blocks by hand using a hand crank drill, a hammer, wedges, and a chisel. He drilled holes about every 3 or 4 inches in a straight line where he wanted to break the rock. Bill would then hammer the steel wedges along the line to eventually break the rock apart, creating blocks. He used a crane boom with a tackle system and a heavy-duty tong to lift the heavy blocks into place to construct the wall. With the help of his friend, Ray Bolster, who was an exceptional stonemason, Bill Keys began to construct an impressive chimney where he lived at in 1913 at the Desert Queen Mill site. Once Bill acquired ownership of the Desert Queen site, he immediately filed a homestead claim on the property in 1917, and the chimney and fireplace were reportedly completed by then. Bill then began to build a permanent cabin at the chimney. The original cabin had one long room with a porch and a room upstairs. The main floor of the cabin originally had living sleeping area at the fireplace and a kitchen at the other end. Around 1919, Bill brought over an old cabin from the Desert Queen mine and repurposed it into a new but small kitchen for the ranch house. The house grew as needed over the years. He soon added a bedroom onto the house for Francis. He enclosed the porch to the rear of the house in the mid-1920s, creating a little bedroom for the kids to sleep in. Francis's mother, Lena Lawton, would often visiting from the spring throughout the summer. She helped Francis with the canning and kept busy sewing patchwork quilts and sunbonnets. The room upstairs is where Lena stayed while visiting. When Lena was not there, Francis's brothers, family friends, or visitors would stay in the upstairs room. So Bill cut a small hole in the ceiling above the fireplace and built a trap door to allow the heat to rise into the upstairs room. In the mid to late 1920s, he added a larger bedroom for the kids, converting the smaller one into a storage room. In the 1950s, Bill placed a modified 55-gallon drum on top of the chimney to stop the north winds from blowing into it, forcing the smoke into the house. In 1934, Bill acquired another cabin from the Roach Mine at nearby Gold Park Mining District to be used as a new kitchen. Bill removed the old, smaller kitchen and attached the new, larger one to the house, which is today's kitchen. Bill would eventually install a wood stove in this new kitchen. Sometime in the mid to late 30s, Bill acquired a bathroom from the El Dorado mine at the nearby Piñon Mining District and moved it to the ranch. Before this, they took sponge baths in front of the fireplace. For years, the new bathroom was set up in the west yard where they took hot showers. It wasn't until the 1950s when Bill finally attached the bathroom to the back of the ranch house and built a water heater for it. He also installed a desert cooler which reached through one of the windows to the outside. This cooler was a screened-in cabinet extending to the outside of the house, much like a bay window. The cabinet had a water pan on top with burlap sacks fastened down the inside of the pan, and the sacks were draped over the exterior of the screen. In this method, the burlap sacks would siphon the water from the pan at the top, keeping the sacks wet at all times. When the breeze blew through it, it kept things cool. This is where they would keep items such as milk and butter. Bill later acquired a propane refrigerator from one of General George Patton's nearby desert training camps. The camp had been abandoned, and Bill filed a claim on the land in the mid-1940s and brought the refrigerator to the house. The well located near the southwest corner of the ranch house was dug by Bill Keyes right around the time he built the first cabin. This was the water source for most of their household needs. The Arundo Donax, which is tall perennial cane that surrounds the well, was regularly watered by Francis using dirty dishwater. In the early 1940s, Bill started to build a stone walls for a cabin next to the ranch house, but it wasn't until 1951 when he completed it. It was used as a store for groceries and items Francis would have extra to sell to local families and monument visitors. She even had a collection of unique items inside, which she called her museum collection. This building is more commonly known today as the museum and storehouse. Over a several-year period, Frances collected a large amount of colored glass and bottles from old mining sites as she traveled around the area. Her collection grew so large, Bill built tables in front of the house so she can keep them in the sun to help them change color. 2 weeks was wash day. The family used a gas-powered 1929 Model 30 Maytag wringer washer to do their laundry. They would build a fire under a wash tub to heat the water, put the warm water into the washing machine, and put their clothes in. They would then take them out, run them through the wringer, and hang them on the clothesline to dry. Located in front of the ranch house, you'll see a Willys Jeep. One day in late 1948, a doctor stopped by the ranch and wanted to buy a mining claim from Bill Keyes. Bill admired the Willys Jeep the doctor was driving and offered to trade a mining claim for the Jeep. After the deal was struck, the Jeep became Bill's favorite vehicle. It's a 1/4 ton, 4-wheel drive that can go just about anywhere he would ever want to go. The original Jeep had a canvas top, which wore out regularly. In 1956, Willis took the Jeep down to Joshua Tree, where he cut up an old Model A, fitting its roof on top of the Jeep. The Jeep legend was...
Tom, I'm going to interrupt just for a second because it seems like a couple of folks are having issues seeing the presentation. So everyone who okay, so anyone who's having issues on the crowdcast, we're just stopping for a second. If anyone who's experiencing an issue can just refresh their browser and just give us a thumbs up on the chat when you're back, we'll resume.
Very good. Let me know when to continue.
Yes, I'm going to write that on the chat too. Okay, we'll just give them a minute. Okay. Likewise, if you are seeing everything good, let us know. Okay, a couple of people are saying good to go. Now I see a photo. Okay. Great. So moving forward, if you start experiencing any issues, just do a quick refresh. And also know that all of this is recorded, so you'll be getting an email, a follow-up email with access to the recording as well. Seems like we're good to go, Tom. Thank you, and sorry about that.
No worries. Back to the Willys Jeep parked in front of the ranch house. The original Jeep had a canvas top which wore out regularly. In 1956, Willis took the Jeep down to Joshua Tree, where he cut up an old Model A Ford, fitting its roof as a hard top for the Jeep. The Jeep legend began in November 1940, which happened to be 80 years from now, 80 years ago, in the early days of World War II, a year before the United States entered the war. Willys Overland Motors Incorporated, Jeep, began in Toledo, Ohio. Not far from here, you'll see an old tractor. Bill purchased this old Fordson tractor from Phil Sullivan in 29 Palms. At first, he used the tractor to plow the orchard and the garden area. He later converted it to be used in conjunction with a woodcutter. This came in real handy to cut firewood. Fordson is the brand name of the general-purpose tractors that were mass-produced starting in 1917 by Henry Ford and Sons. Every ranch needed chickens to provide eggs and meals, and the chickens themselves for meat. Bill Keyes had the more unusual chicken coop than most people. His came complete with the body of an old car. This is more commonly known today as the chicken coop, spelled C-O-U-P-E. Wagons were common use in the early days of the ranch. They hauled a lot more than just ore. They were used for trips down to buy supplies, moving equipment from one place to another, or just taking the kids somewhere. The middle, larger wagon was manufactured by the Studebaker Company before they began making cars. Henry and Clement Studebaker set up a blacksmith shop in South Bend, Indiana in 1852 and soon started making wagons. The wagons were later replaced by motor vehicles. Whether you had a ranch, a mill site, a mine, or just a small cabin, you needed some place to do your business. Keyes Desert Queen Ranch was no different. A story has been passed down over the years telling that when young, the Keyes kids wanted to dig their own mine to find gold. Bill thought this was a great idea and showed them just where to dig. After digging down several feet and finding no gold or treasure, they lost interest. Bill took this opportunity to relocate the outhouse to a new spot. The Sears, Roebuck and Company catalog back in the day might have been kept in the outhouse, but it was not necessarily used for reading. During the 1959 filming and subsequent release in 1960 of Wild Girls of the West and Chico the Misunderstood Coyote in 1961, which were TV episodes of Walt Disney, Disney used this building to store their equipment for filming and to possibly process their film on site. The building is more commonly known today as the Disney Darkroom. Next to the Disney Darkroom, you'll see what appears to be a storehouse. These are two old cyanide vats that were converted into a tack room. Cyanide was used to separate the gold from ore and could be very dangerous. Bill Keyes had a knack of repurposing things, converting these vats into a more practical use of the day. He stacked one vat on top of the other, connecting them, and added a door to the side so the tack would be easy to access and kept out of the harsh weather. Next to this, you will see an abandoned a cabin. When Bill filed on abandoned claims, he would repurpose about everything he could, and this included the cabins. He would disassemble the cabins, bring them to where he wanted them, and reassemble them. This is one of the many cabins that Bill would acquire and put into good use. The small cabin was assembled here in 1937 and used as a guest house over the years. It was also used as a cabin people could rent if they wanted to stay in the area for an extended stay. Of the many things Bill Keyes would collect and use was farming equipment. They would use them on the fields where they grew hay and alfalfa, as well as corn and other crops. When Bill no longer had use for the equipment, he put them out on display for anybody to trade for. To help process the ore retrieved from mines, a crusher was sometimes used. A crusher is a machine designed to reduce large rocks into smaller rocks, gravel, or rock dust. There are various types of crushers in the industry. Francis held school sessions for Willis and Virginia in the ranch house at first. Starting in 1930, Orrin Booth was the first school teacher. This was a building that was once used as a small Desert Queen school and was built around 1932 by Bill Keyes. It is located near the guest house. Orrin taught the Keyes children as well as other children from other families in the area. After school operations were moved to the new schoolhouse by the lake, this was used as storage. Willis later used this cabin as his bedroom when he would return home from high school. On the ground, you'll see several junk cars scattered all over. Some were bought and used by Bill Keyes, some by Willis, and others Bill collected from where they were abandoned and left behind. Whether they ran or not, he would always find use for the parts from the vehicles. He would use the engines to run various machinery. He even made his own vehicles by welding together parts from different cars and trucks. In the 1940 Pioneer May Day Parade in 29 Palms, Bill drove a vehicle he created by crossing an automobile with an Iowa farm wagon. Bill Keyes acquired this old 1922 Mack truck in late 1948. This truck was believed to have belonged to the county of San Bernardino and was abandoned in the area. Finding the truck, Bill Keyes brought it to the ranch. As far as Bill was concerned, they no longer wanted it, and he did. Finders keepers. Bill Keyes played a role as a prospector in the 1960 Disney film Wild Rose of the West and drove this Mack truck in it. Mack trucks were founded in 1900 by Jack and Gus Mack of Brooklyn, New York, and were originally known as the Mack Brothers. As the Mack truck was part of the Desert Queen Ranch tour, it had been parked in the same spot for many years and not moved until October 2005. One day when a ranger arrived to give a tour, he noticed the Mack truck was not parked in its normal spot. At first, this was a great mystery how this may have occurred. During one of Willis's many visits to the ranch, he told one of the rangers he bet the truck could still run. So she told him to go ahead and give it a try, and he did. Seeing what parts he needed, Willis returned the next day, fixed the truck, and gave it a drive around the ranch. I would have loved to see the look on the face of the other ranger when he arrived the next day to give his ranch tour. This 1912 traffic truck was used to haul gold ore and was acquired by Bill around 1940 from the gold coin mine in the Pinion Mining District. After he drove it to the ranch, he stripped it down, even removing the old four-cylinder engine. In the early 1950s, Willis added the framework to the truck to help separate sand from gravel to make concrete. He planned on starting a concrete business, but never finished the project. In the beginning, the family mailbox was located 36 miles away next to present-day Interstate 10 at the beginning of 29 Palms Highway near Whitewater. There were a number of mailboxes located there for residents surrounding the northern part of present-day Joshua Tree National Park. Since there were no established communities with post offices, this was the closest location where U.S. mail would be delivered. 29 Palms did not get their first post office until 1927, Yucca Valley and Joshua Tree in the mid-1940s. When Joshua Tree opened their post office, Bill moved the family mailbox near the intersection of present-day 29 Palms Highway and Park Boulevard in the community of Joshua Tree. This was closer to the ranch as it was only 18 miles away. It would remain there for years. Did you know Zone Improvement Plan, zip codes, were not used in the United States until their introduction nationwide on July 1st, 1963. The U.S. Postal Service used a cartoon character, which they called Mr. Zip, to promote the use of zip codes. The ranch has piles of iron, metal pipes, various parts, and miscellaneous scrap. Bill bought out an old junkyard once and moved everything to the ranch. If a part was needed at the ranch, mine, or mill site, they would check the pile. If they did not have what they need, it was easier to improvise it there rather than going to town to look for it. If they did not have what they needed, they made it there. Bill would collect unwanted old stoves and bring them back to the ranch. If Frances could use it, it was hers. Otherwise, they were made available for sale or trade to anyone who needed it. Some of the models found here were Glenwood, Wedgwood, and reliable gas stoves. One item nearly every miner would need was a machine that brought fresh air to breathe into their mine. This machine did just that. A John Deere motor was connected to a belt-driven Champion blower to provide air within the mine. In the mining industry, mercury was used to recover minute pieces of gold that was mixed in the soil and sediment. A device similar to this could also be used to melt the mercury off, leaving behind only the gold. What mine would be complete without an ore car, 2 or 3? Bill Keyes had just about everything one would need to work their claim. This arrastra was used by Bill Keyes in conjunction with one of the stamp mills and other machines to crush ore. It was built right around 1933. The arrastra is a primitive method used by early miners to process gold ore. They were designed to extract gold that was locked inside rocks. The basic design generally used 2 large flat stones that were dragged around a circular pit made of flat stones. The drag stones were attached to a central pivot, which allowed them to be dragged repeatedly over the ore that was placed in the arrastra. Arrastras were commonly used to train wild mules and horses. This got them used to the reins and harnesses. At first, they were typically powered by mules and horses, also by steam and water, and later by gasoline engines. The one stamp mill was brought to the ranch in 1924 by Bill Keyes. He acquired it from a mill site in Gold Park Mining District near the north entrance of the park. It is one of the more efficient ways to crush ore to get the gold. Bill had his hand in some 30 mines throughout the area. Bill would also do custom mill work for other miners. Many claims were leased out to mining companies to provide a source of income for the family over the years. The stamp mill is a mechanical ore crusher. They would haul it by wagon or truck to the mill site and assemble it there. The stamps were heavy metal weights that were lifted and dropped onto the ore by a crankshaft. The crushed ore would then be further refined, usually using mercury or cyanide process. The mills were noisy, heavy, and somewhat awkward to operate. There were several ways to power the stamp mill. One way was a water wheel, another way was a steam engine. In the later years, they were powered by gasoline engines. Bill McCaney, a close friend to Bill Keyes, moved to Keyes Desert Queen Ranch in 1931 at the age of 72 and lived his final years in this cabin. Bill rigged an intercom system between the ranch house and the McCaney cabin. This allowed them to check on him from time to time to make sure he was okay. They could also call him and let him know they were walking over breakfast or dinner. Bill McCaney often enjoyed sharing his many stories with the Keyes kids during his time. He lived there until his death in 1937. Over the years, the original cabin which Bill McCaney lived in while staying at the ranch started to fall apart. The National Park Service later rebuilt the cabin as it appears today to preserve its history. The stick corral is original to the ranch, once connected to the adobe barn. Bill Keyes built it out of willow poles and cable. He kept small number of goats there at the ranch at one time, as well as other small animals inside there. The ranch had a series of 3 dams to protect the ranch and the surrounding area. The first dam was constructed was the North Dam, the second was the South Dam, and the last was the Middle Dam above the lake cabin. After the lake had begun to form up behind the northern dam, the water began to run out where the present South Day Dam is located. Bill built a dirt levee in the area of the southern dam above the house to contain the water. In the early 1920s, Bill and Frances completed an earthen dam at the site, but it was later washed out in the 1920s and replaced with a cement dam in the 1930s, the present southern dam that you see there today. The water from this dam was used for the crops, to water livestock, and later for the stamp mill. Bill called it Keyes Lake and stocked it with fish. Around 1934, after a long drought, the lake dried up and the fish were lost. In January 1949, the lake froze over about 2 feet thick. This enabled the children the opportunity to ice skate on the lake. They would make many improvements to the dam up into the 1950s. The North House is located below the Middle Dam and was built by Bill Keyes in 1919 to serve as a guest house. Outgrowing the school near the house, school operations were moved to this location around 1933. By 1935, they outgrew this schoolhouse and moved to the new Southern Schoolhouse in 1936. The North House then served as a school teacher's cabin and is known today as the Lake Cabin. The Southern Schoolhouse was built in 1936 and was the last one to be used when the youngest Keyes child left to go to school away from the ranch. It is located near the current visitor parking lot at the ranch. The schoolhouse was heated with a tall heater Bill purchased from the Montgomery Ward catalog. The original schoolhouse consisted of just one room. In the early years, Frances needed a new kitchen at the house, so Bill removed the smaller one and drug it over to this location and attached it to the schoolhouse, using it as a storage room. Pictured here are 4 of Bill and Frances's children. They are Ellsworth, Virginia, Willis, and Patricia. Phyllis, their youngest, was not yet born. Frances began teaching their children at the ranch house. In 1930, Bill hired local miner Orrin Booth, who had teaching experience, to teach the children. This would free up Frances to do anything she needed to do to get done around the ranch. Orrin taught the children out of the temporary tent cabin in the beginning, and at first, 3 of the Keyes children were taught there, but other children from local homestead sites and mines started to attend the school. Orrin worked in exchange for room and board. Bill Keyes converted the tent cabin into the first schoolhouse, not far from the ranch house, in 1932, but they quickly outgrew it. Then they moved to the operation to the North House by the Middle Dam for a while. As Bill and Frances had more children and more local children started to attend the school, Bill built the Southern Schoolhouse to accommodate the many children. Due to the number of students attending the ranch school, San Bernardino County school superintendent declared Desert Queen School an emergency school and began to pay towards school supplies and the teacher's salary in 1935. Once the school was moved to the Southern Schoolhouse in 1936, the house by the middle dam was where the school teacher would live. The Desert Queen School, however, only taught as far as the 8th grade. At that point, students had to leave to attend high school at another location. The Desert Queen School closed in 1942 after the youngest Keys child left to attend school away from the ranch. Bill Keys spent nearly 60 years of his life in and around the Desert Queen Ranch. He succeeded in the desert and through his resourcefulness adapted to ever-changing challenges he encountered each and every day. Bill had to be self-reliant and adamantly protected the needs and interests of his family. This attitude sometimes caused him to be at odds with people around him, especially when Joshua Tree National Monument was first formed in 1936. Even though Bill Keys could be difficult to work with at times, many of the surrounding homesteaders and miners considered Bill's Keys Desert Queen Ranch as the center of their desert network and thought of Bill and Frances Keys as their friends. Frances Keys died on January 9, 1963 at the age of 75. Bill Keys died on June 28, 1969, just 3 months short of his 90th birthday. Both are buried in the family cemetery. While the world outside the ranch changed dramatically, the Keys way of life had remained remarkably constant. In 1994, the community of 29 Palms, through Action Council for 29 Palms Incorporated, commissioned a mural titled Bill and Frances Keys to commemorate the Keys family and to illustrate the impact they had on the area. Another mural was dedicated in 2013 titled Desert Queen Ranch. To learn more about Keys Desert Queen Ranch Tour, the book is available for purchase at Joshua Tree National Park Visitor Center, along with its companion book, The History of Joshua Tree National Park. Thank you for taking this tour with me, and I hope to see you in the park someday.
Thank you so much for that fabulous presentation. I hope that if any of the folks that are joining us here tonight have never been to the ranch, they make a point to plan a trip around it, because I actually never planned on going, and I ended up volunteering for a class that happened there, and I was fascinated by just the amount of historical machines that you can see there. So I highly recommend it. Thank you so much, Tom, for that fabulous presentation. If anybody has any questions, I don't see any submitted on the Ask a Question button. So this is a good moment for you to drop questions into the chat. I think mostly everyone, it was so thorough. I think you covered a lot, and I definitely learned a lot more about the artifacts that are in the ranch today. So if nobody has any questions, I just want to take a moment to, again, thank everyone for your patience as we navigate through this virtual world of presenting and hosting events. I think we all wish we could be gathered together in a room, but I think this is the next best thing, and I'm really grateful that we have this resource. So thank you to the Desert Institute, and thank you to the 29 Palms Society for allowing this for us. Hold on one second. Somebody just asked something. Is there a way we can view this again as I missed the middle section? Absolutely. That's part of some of the reminders that I'm going to paste on the chat right now for you all. You will be receiving a follow-up email with a link to the video, but if not, you can log into that same link as when you tuned in today, and you will be able to see the replay. So any parts that you missed due to the technical difficulties, you can go back around the middle section and use your little browser to get to that spot. How do you stable the buildings? It's a harsh climate. Okay, so that is related to the presentation. So Tom, how did they stable the buildings in such a harsh climate?
They go in and they shore them up in various different ways by replacing wood, metal brackets. There was one time, 70s to mid 70s, there wasn't much thought about even preserving the ranch. Then they started giving tours of it and found out how popular it was and how important it was. So now the park does go inside to do their best to shore everything up to make sure it's not going to fall over. You never know what Mother Nature is going to do, but right now everything has been shored up with recycled lumber if they can. If not, then they'll use other lumber and other metal braces to shore everything up to make sure it still stands.
Thank you. Yeah, and then they just made a correction that they meant to say stabilize the buildings. But I think we all got that part of, how do we keep these buildings up? It doesn't seem like we have any other questions. So again, thank you, everyone. I just pasted a bunch of special links for all of you to check out. One of them is for you to sign up for future events. The other ones are for you to donate to Joshua Tree National Park Association and Desert Institute and the 29 Palms Historical Society. Obviously, you've all made a donation, a contribution for being here today, but remember that gifting season is coming around the corner, and you can always use a gift, a donation on behalf of one loved one, or also sharing these links with your community so that they can also have access to our programming and support our events. Okay, so more questions came in, which is exciting. The first question is from Matthew, and he's asking if there is water at the ranch now.
Yes, there still is a couple of wells there, and they periodically open them up to measure the depth. So the answer to that, there is water in the wells, but there's no running water per se. So there's no outside water going into the park. There's no outside electricity going to the park, but at the ranch itself, there are a couple of water wells that still have water in them.
And the water, is it safe water, or is it just?
Use it for drinking purposes. They will use the water to water some of the fruit trees that are still remain there, but it is not used for drinking purposes. For the caretakers who are there, they will bring potable water in a storage tank there, but they don't necessarily use the water from the well for the caretakers.
Got it. That makes sense. Kitty is asking, is it the plan to keep everything in place as long as possible?
Yes, it is. We're trying to keep it historically accurate. Most everything that you see there was left as Bill Keyes left it. After Bill Keyes died, the National Park Service did acquire some other equipment that the Keyes family owned, and they brought it to the ranch. So, but everything there that you see are things that Bill Keyes owned and acquired, and for the most part, it's how he left it.
Nice. And then Andrew asked when about, but maybe he meant what about the Serrano at Mara?
I'm not sure if I understand that question.
I think, Andrew, do you want to construe on your question? Maybe you can drop something on the chat. Are you inquiring about like a relationship between the Serrano at Mara and the ranch, or what specific question? So we'll wait for Andrew to construe on that. And in the meantime, Michael just asked what kind of fish were in the lake.
You know, I remember reading about that, but I don't recall exactly what they were, so I can't answer that.
Got it. Ben Costello just asked, is the tour wheelchair accessible?
It is not.
Do you know if there are any plans of making it accessible at any point?
No, they do not. Right now, it's natural desert, how the Keyes family left it, and there is no intentions to mine hard surface along there to allow that. So anybody who may have a walker or difficulty going on there, that's one of the questions we ask before we allow them there. Do they have any medical situations that would not allow them to keep up with the group?
Got it. So that's actually really, I appreciate that question, and I think whenever you, as a visitor or patron of the park, steward of the park, have those inquiries, I think it's worth reaching out to the park and and ask for some alternatives. Like I know in some, for example, at the Great Sand Dunes, they have a sand wheelchair that people can borrow for the day if they want to access the dunes, and obviously we cannot access it on a regular wheelchair. So that is something that potentially, if we can all get together and request those features, I'm sure the park can start making some budget adjustments and uh, make some adaptable solutions for folks that may not be able to access the desert as it is right now.
That's a great idea. I've never even thought about a sand wheelchair, and something like that could be kept at that location and reserved in advance. So that's a wonderful idea. I hope somebody makes that idea, presents it to the national park. Send an email to the national park suggesting that, and hopefully they'll start considering something like that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we all can send that email, right? Like it's very even if
Anybody can.
we
The park
can.
is very
So
open to comments and suggestions.
absolutely. So everyone who's here tonight, that's a great idea that we should all take 5 minutes and send it over and look up those links to those sand wheelchairs, and then more folks will be able to appreciate and experience this ranch, and not just the ranch really, but other areas in the park as well. Okay, one final question, and we'll wrap it up after this. Is from Kitty. She's asking, do you think the Mack truck still could run?
Honestly, I think it can, yes. I know Willis made the comment in 2005. It doesn't take much. I think he had to replace a spark plug and refresh the gas. It didn't take much. And honestly, my answer is yes. To my knowledge, it has not been driven since 2005. But based on what Willis had said at that time, he thinks it'll run forever.
Wow, that would be fabulous if someone can actually get it running one of these days, if permitted or if allowed, of course. Okay, two more questions as they just came through, and then we'll wrap it up because I want to be mindful of your time, Tom, and everybody else who joined us here for the hour tonight. So the last question is from Bree. She's asking, how close are you able to camp to this location? Are any good ghost stories to share?
The nearest campground would be the Hidden Valley Campground. But having said that, the ranch is closed to anybody inside there. It's completely fenced off and gated, and with signs telling people not to go inside there. So the closest campground is there. And are there ghost stories? Sure, there are ghost stories of this park. And I read articles before about many of the different ghost stories. Of the Keys Ranch itself, I'm not aware of any.
Are there books about them, or do you have any links? Like, where have you published those articles, and maybe folks can go check them out?
There have been other books published in the past. Helped co-write a book, also written by Art Kidwell. It's called Growing Up at Desert Queen Ranch. Art Kidwell, a local historian and author, wrote a book about Bill Keys and him being ambushed by a local resident, where the local authorities did not believe Bill Keys, and Bill Keys was sent to prison. He was later released from prison and received a full governor's pardon because he was kind of not given a fair trial, and it definitely wasn't ambushed. He did not intend to kill this other person. The other person had intended to kill him. So that's an amazing story in itself.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about that book and haven't gone into it, but it's been recommended by many folks especially folks that work in the service. Okay, so the last question is from Matthew, and he's asking, I saw Wild Burros of the Desert as a child. Didn't know it was filmed there. Is it available for viewing or purchase anywhere now?
No, it is not. We have asked Disney themselves if they have any plans. To my knowledge, they never even answered that. I know their They have the Disney Channel, and they're starting to make more things available. And there was the Wonderful World of Disney in Color and Disney Presents were two different shows that these both were displayed on back in the 1950s and 60s. And I'm hoping they do someday, but no. I have researched, and other rangers have researched to try to find these. And although I have seen copies of them, but they're copies of copies, they're not actual original from Disney.
Wow, yeah, keeping an eye out for that. And I'm sure if that becomes available, that's something that if you are in the Desert Institute mailing list, I feel like Kevin does a really good job of putting really good links to related articles there all the time. So I'm sure you'll get notified of something of that sort. I think that's it for tonight. Again, I want to thank everyone. I dropped those important links to our YouTube channel, our Instagram, our donations for your consideration in the gifting season. And again, your support is really invaluable for us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas, for tonight. And I hope everybody has a great weekend and stay safe.
Thank you.